Okay, so today I would like to introduce our guest. He probably needs no introduction for many of you, but for those of you who do not know our guest, I will launch into my intro for Dugie Russell. So Dugie is a Beverly native with so many diverse hobbies and interests he can barely keep up with them, as I think many of you probably know. It's amazing. Dugie is an award-winning gardener, a published photographer, a retired shipwreck diver, and a unique craftsman folk artist. He makes birdhouses and cribbage boards, among other things, I believe. As well as being a mycophagist. Does everyone know what that is? No. A person who hunts and eats wild mushrooms. As a matter of fact, I think Dougie's first program for Monday mornings for me was his wild mushroom hunting. Beverly's Friendly Garden Club has dubbed Dugie Beverly's Renaissance Man, and I think that's pretty accurate. Dugie worked for almost 30 years in the Massachusetts court system as both a deputy sheriff and a court officer. He was also one of the original founders of the Essex County Sheriff's Search and Recovery Dive Team. He retired in 2002, devoting more time to his many hobbies and interests. And as many of you probably know today, Dugie's presentation is Back to the Artic 40 years later, embellished with his own professional photography and, of course, his dynamic personality and witty sense of humor. A Q&A segment will follow the presentation, so please hold on to your questions until the conclusion of the slideshow. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Dugie Russell.
Thank you very much. I just came down for the introduction, so I'll see you people later. What we're going to do here today is going to take a little trip through time, 1957 to be exact, when I joined the service as a 17-year-old teenager and was trucked off to Thule, Greenland, a place I did not want to go. I had better hopes of seeing young ladies and things, and there were no women up at this place. Although they said there was a woman behind every tree, all you had to do was find a tree. But it was a place that was pretty desolate, sunshine 24 hours a day, darkness 24 hours a day, could get very confusing. And just a place that when someone says you're going to Thule, Greenland, your bottom fell out. We couldn't wait to get out of here as teenagers. But then a short time later, something happened. I was looking for some friends of mine that I was stationed with and seeing if I could have an arrangement to meet them later. And I stumbled upon a thing that was going down called Operation Blue Nose, which was the title for Thule Air Force Base, the code name, when it first started back in the 1950. And they were looking for people to come back and celebrate the 50th anniversary of Thule Air Force Base. I got in touch with a Lieutenant Gardner up at Thule, and he asked me if I had photographs. I said, I've got tons. And I was selected one of 10 people out of about 2,000 that were selected to go back to Thule and celebrate for 10 days the anniversary of the base. And it was an experience of a lifetime. I'll never, ever forget it. It was just truly wonderful. So with no further ado, I'm going to take you through 1957 when I was a young, cocky 17-year-old kid up until I was an old man going back to Thule, Greenland. So with no further ado, here we go. As you can see here, I don't look too cocky. Right after this picture on the left was taken, I caught pneumonia on the rifle range, and I wound up in the hospital. And look at that. Anyhow, I fell in love with this nurse, and which didn't mean anything. She was older than me and didn't pay any attention to me, but I fell in love with her anyhow. And a short time later, when I recovered, I was shipped off to a place called Goose Bay, Labrador. And again, we didn't care for it. We got there during the night season, and it was cold and dark, and we just wanted out. And one day our NCOIC came in and said, I want 5 volunteers to go temporary duty for 90 days. And we figured it would be anywhere, Europe, United States, Hawaii, anywhere. So we asked him where it was, and he wouldn't tell us. So we volunteered, and that's something you don't do. And when we finally asked him, he said, you're off to Thule, Greenland. That's another couple of thousand miles north, you know. So the 59th Squadron was the squadron I was in at Goose Bay, Labrador, Frigate Andu, which means the Black Watch. And the one on the right with the Flying Tigers was the 74th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, which I was in at Thule, Greenland, along with NEAC, Northeast Air Command, and then later on with the 15th Cameron Delta Dagger Squadron in Niagara Falls, New York. This was the type of plane we were flying in the early 50s. It was an F-89 Scorpion. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. It's an F-89 Scorpion, and it's a plane that really didn't get its due. If you look up airplanes for the United States Air Force, it's one that you really don't see that much of. But it was quite a plane in its day, and this is the flight line at Goose Bay, Labrador, and then bingo, off to Thule, Greenland. We were 800 miles from the North Pole. And like every good person that crosses the Arctic Circle, you get a certificate dubbing you a Knight of the Blue Nose. And this is Thule Air Force Base from afar, and North Star Bay here with the blue and the ice. And these ice caps you see coming down off the mountains we will get to a little later on. During the early spring, Coast Guard cutter would come up and break up the harbor to let our cargo ships in to bring us our supplies. And again, we were at Thule, Greenland in the 74th. We were flying F-89 Scorpions. This one here, the name on it is the Pregnant Lady. And this is our flight line at Thule. We had 4 planes ready to go at all times. And this is during the Cold War now. You have to remember the Russians were playing games with us, and we were playing games with the Russians. So we had these planes ready to go. They were armed with 2.75 rockets, and later on we incorporated into the Falcon missile that you see this gentleman holding here. And that's an F-89 firing the rockets, which they could fire in a volley of 54 at a time or 104 rockets all at once, depending on their target. My job was maintaining the armament on the aircraft. Here I am loading an F-89. You had to slip this tool over the weapon and drive it in, being very careful that before you put it in the tube that you ground it out, because you don't want to be standing in front of 54 rockets like this and have them go off. And here I am again, loading an F-89, getting it ready for going. The weapons were carried in weapons carriers like this here. And again, a young 17-year-older getting the planes ready. Still cocky as hell. I want you to take notice of one thing here that's really amazing. This building in the background that you see, that straight building, was the parachute loft, where they did the parachutes for all the different planes that were at Thule. And when I returned 44 years later, it was the only thing that was missing. Everything else was the same. It was marvelous. It was great. This is an F-89 in Thule practicing firing 2.75 rockets, and you can see the wingtips light up as she lets go a salvo. An F-89 coming in with South Mountain on the backdrop. Some had some bad landings, and that's why we had H-21 helicopters for rescue in case they crash on the ice cap and so forth. This was the hangar where I worked, and we would spend 24 hours on and 48 hours off. And that sounds pretty good to some people, but you know, to have 48 hours off, but it really wasn't that good because even if you got a 3-day pass, you know, you had nowhere to go. So it didn't matter that much to us. But when I went back, the hangar was still there. I went inside. The guy opened the doors for me. When those doors opened, it was deja vu again. And it was just an awesome feeling. I actually got choked up quite a bit when I saw those doors first starting to rise up because I could see the planes. I could see the pilots scrambling on a red alert. The Russians are coming, and we'd fire the doors would open on both sides of the hangar so that we could fire the aircraft up in the hangar itself and go straight from the hangar to the end of the runway, and he'd kick it in afterburner, and off they'd go. We had T-33 trainers up there, outdated now, of course. B-52s weren't stationed there, but it was a place that they could come in case they had an emergency of any kind. They were flying over to Russia, and Russia would send up its fighters and turn us around, and then they would do the same to us. We also had B-47s that were stationed with us here, and KC-97 tankers that would refuel the 47s on the way to Russia during the Cold War. The one plane we liked to see was the Globemaster, and when we saw this, we knew we were getting mail. There wasn't too much to do up there, as I said, and when we saw one of these planes coming in, everybody jumped with joy because we knew later that afternoon we'd have mail from the States. It was kind of a lonely place to be. And with no women up there for a whole year, I have still yet to forgive the United States Air Force for that. This is what they called a Russian Bear, and this is the plane the Russians would send over to spy on us, and they were also loaded and ready to go. We came awfully close during the 50s of going to an all-out atomic war, which would have been total annihilation of both countries, because we would have bombed them, they would have bombed us, and it just would have escalated, and it wouldn't have been a pretty sight. We didn't have these F-15s at the time, but they're still doing the same thing. They go up, they pull alongside, the pilots would tell me they would pull alongside these Russian planes from here to the end of the wall there, and they'd wave at each other, and then the United States guys would go, okay, take a hike, and he'd bank off and head back to Russia. And it was just a tennis game that they were playing. This was the barracks where I lived, and it's kind of sloppy right now because it's spring. And you can see Mount Dundas in the background here, which you're going to see a lot of during this slideshow. It's a kind of an icon of a place for Thule, Greenland. The barracks was number 255, and when we went back, I went right back to the old barracks. I went in my old room, and it was deja vu again. It was just marvelous seeing all this stuff again and knowing that I didn't have to stay there for a year. Again, a young, cocky airman. We did a lot of drinking beer. We did a lot of gambling. And there really wasn't that much more to do. We had movies and so forth, but we had seen them all in the States before we got there anyhow, so they were kind of like repeats to us. This gentleman that you see on the left here, his name was George. He was a Greek kid. And he used to pull KP for everybody up there. KP was kitchen police. And nobody wanted to go on KP. You had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and scrub potatoes and get the kitchen ready and the food ready for everybody else on the base. So everybody hated it, and nobody had any place to spend their money. So George worked the night shift, and he would go out and pull KP for everybody, and the guy made a ton of money, And every night when George got off duty, we'd all be sleeping, and he'd come in about 12 o'clock midnight, and he'd open the door to the barracks, and he would stand down the end of the barracks, and the barracks are as wide as a car on a train. The rooms were very tiny, which you'll see. And George would stand at the end of the corridor, and he had a voice on him, and he would scream, "I hate this effing place." And we'd all say, "George is here," and go back to sleep again. And here I am doing a little ironing, and just behind me is my bunk bed. There was 2 people to a room, and it was like sleeping in a small closet. There really wasn't much room there. Doing a little typing, thinking of home, thinking of the girls. Someday I'm going to get out of here. Now, while you were at Thule, there were 4 different conditions that we had up there. When we were there, we called them phases. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, and Phase 4. Phase 1, they would announce on the base that their Thule Air Base is now in a Phase 1 condition, prepare for a Phase 2. Phase 2 would be Thule Air Base is now in a Phase 2, prepare for a Phase 3, find any shelter that you can get into now. You duck, if you couldn't get back to your barracks, you duck into a hangar. If you couldn't get into there, you duck into somewhere else, because Phase 3 was coming, and after that, if you were caught outside, you were a dead man. You weren't going to make it. And so if you were out on the roads for anything, going up to the mountains to the 90mm sites or the Nike sites for anti-aircraft, we had these little rooms or huts that you could go to, plenty of fuel, communications, definitely keep you warm and so forth, and you could stay in there. There was for a week if you had to, and sometimes you had to stay in for a week because that's how long the storm would last. It would be blowing 100 miles an hour outside at 60 below. If you stepped outside, you'd freeze to death in a matter of seconds. And while we were trapped either in here or at our barracks, we had this rain gauge. And top one, you could take showers. The second one, you could take showers, but only for a very brief time, I guess. And then it got down to, if this storm was going on for days, it was face and hands only. And then if it really got bad and the place was running out of water, it got down to drinking water only. You couldn't wash or anything. And after a week in the barracks with about 60 guys, and we're all cooking K rations of tuna and things on hot plates, it wasn't a very nice place to be. It really smelt pretty bad. Our toilets were kind of unique. Once you did your duty, you had to turn the wing nut on the top, right there, and step on the pedal down below, like the gas pedal, and crank the shifter back and forth, making sure you did not lean over the hopper. They had a tendency to backfire. So, and on the outside, everything was above ground at Thule because of the permafrost. You couldn't, it was like cement, and you couldn't drill through it. So all our pipes coming into the barracks were piped into us, and all of our waste and shower water and everything went into a big tank that would be pumped out by other airmen down at the motor pool. And this pipe sticking out right here, have I got I don't have an arrow on that. Yeah, that's okay. There's a pipe sticking out right there, and that went into the tank where all our waste was and so forth. And it would drip, and when it dripped, it created a huge icicle from the pipe to the ground. It's kind of a palomino brown. And if you screwed up, which I didn't, but if you did, they gave you a little pickaxe to go out and chop this thing. And it wasn't a big pickaxe like this, it was a little pickaxe. So you would, and this would break off and hit you in the face, and it wasn't a pleasant thing. So I made sure that I behaved myself because I didn't want anything to do with the poopsicle, you know. This picture was taken before I got there by a friend of mine, and it had a little patch of grass, and it said, "Keep off the grass." That's the only grass that we had when we were up there. And when I was there, it was the same in front of my barracks. We had one, put the rocks around this little patch of grass that we had, and we were quite happy. There was an Eskimo village just below Mount Dundas that we weren't allowed to visit. We weren't allowed to do too much up there. We couldn't climb Mount Dundas, which we wanted to do. We couldn't go to the village. It was off limits. And so we really didn't get a chance to do the things that we wanted to do. So the Eskimos were very nice people. These pictures were taken by one of the gentlemen that I went back to Thule with in 2002, and he was one of the first up there to help design the runway and so forth, and he was the one that took these pictures. The Eskimos were gone when we went back. They had moved either further north or further south, I don't know, for better hunting and fishing. But again, it was quite interesting to see these. And you don't call them Eskimos anymore, you call them Inuits. I don't know why people get upset about that, but anyhow. Very nice people. He told us all about them. And as you can see there, this is their home behind them. They lived in some of these tundra-made houses. And others lived in these regular houses that were kind of nice. And when I went back, we found this hut, but it was probably down to 3/4 of the size it once was. And there's one of the houses in the background with a North Mountain in the background also. And they were having a dance out here, and it was kind of cool. And I used to go out to dances also, and this is me downtown with all my friends. And after our time there, we're ready to go. I mean, we wanted out of this place so bad we couldn't see straight, really. And finally, the day came, and we lined up all our aircraft. Our aircraft were outdated, and we were being replaced by an outfit from California with F-102 Delta Daggers, a more modern type of aircraft. So this was the day that the planes were all being flown back to the United States, and which meant that we were getting ready to leave real soon. These are the pilots, a great bunch of guys that I worked with. They had to stay with us also naturally in the alert hangars, and we became very good friends. The crew chiefs the same way, just a great bunch of guys, and it was kind of sad to see them go, and we were leaving. We were happy to go, but it was kind of sad also. These are the F-102 Delta Daggers that replaced our F-89s. There's a squadron coming over South Mountain. It was a cool looking plane for its day, the best we had. And it fired 2.75 rockets, and as you can see down on the belly of the plane, it's firing Falcon missiles also, which were the newer things. And then came 50th anniversary of Operation Blue Jay, the gathering of the Knights of the Blue Nose. And again, there was 10 of us selected to go. 4 backed out at the very last minute, so we wound up with 6 people going. I flew from Hanscom Field in up on 128 and to McGuire Air Force Base, and joined these gentlemen here, and these were the other 5 guys that I went up with. This gentleman right here, Ed Brink, called me before we left and said that I noticed that you're from Beverly, Massachusetts, and I've been looking for a friend of mine that was stationed with me. He was my roommate. And I've gone down your way around Boston. I've looked him up in city halls. I've gone to cemeteries. I've done everything, and I could never find the guy. And I really wish I could. And he said, you wouldn't happen to know Bob Whitney, would you? And I said, Bob Whitney is my best friend. This guy is from Ohio, and he's going back to Thule, Greenland with me. And I mean, you talk about a small world. It was incredible. After we got back from this trip, Bob came on from California, and I reunited the 2 of them in my backyard, and it was quite spectacular. It was really neat. This was a great bunch of guys. Mr. Shapiro, he was in weather. Frank in the background here. With the glasses, he was a civilian contractor, not in the service. And Dan Lufkin, with the glasses and the hat, he was a full bird colonel. I mean, I was a little airman second class, but you know, we all got along great. Jimmy Dalla here was a private also, and he was on the 90 millimeter sights, and along with Ed Brink on the right, they were on the 90 millimeter sights up in the mountains that protected us in case of an aerial attack. Just great guys, and we had an excellent time together. We pulled into McGuire Air Force Base. This is the runway here, and we're walking out. And it's a MATS, a military air transport base, and these are all the different planes that they fly out of the base mounted on these sticks here. The C-54 on the left is the plane I went to Thule, Greenland in 1957, and the plane on the right, the Starlifter, was the plane I flew up in 2002. Talk about difference, makes me feel old. On the way to Thule, you're looking out the window and you're seeing landscaping like this. This was actually an island, I believe we were going over. But all you saw was ice, snow, icebergs, and so forth, and it was just, God, I just hope we don't crash. The accommodations weren't the best, but if it was good enough for our troops that are flying today, it was good enough for us. I'm having my box lunch here, and this young lady sleeping right here, we were surprised to see her, and we found out that the government was flying her up to see her husband because he'd been there 2 years and she hadn't seen him in 2 years. So she was coming up and he didn't know it. And we had a banquet for us one night and him, and she came walking out of the room, and it was really very, very cool. It was very touching. This is us getting off the plane at Thule, and Lieutenant Gardner on the left here, he was the man that set this whole thing up for us. These same doors I walked through when I was 17, and all of us here were just tickled pink to be here. The gentleman in the white jacket, he flew up with us. He was number 7. And he had bought a sandwich at McGuire Air Force Base on one of those sandwich dispensers, which was the last sandwich. And he ate it, and he got food poisoning, and he was deathly sick on the way up. They had to rush him to the hospital when we got here, and they had to spin him right around and fly him back to the States. So he didn't manage to stay with us. So it wound up, there were 6 of us there. When I opened this door and stepped inside the building, it was a long building, but a very narrow building. You stepped inside, you had to go through customs, and then you just stepped out the other door. And when I stepped outside the other door, deja vu struck. It was unbelievable. Nothing had changed. And as you can see, the different places that were so far from us, McGuire Air Force Base, we had flown up 2,264 miles to get to Thule. And Russia was 2,235 miles away. That's why we needed B-52 bombers. This was the North Star Inn where we stayed, much different than my barracks. It had a great little room with TV, very comfortable, and the food was out of this world. And we had women there. It was amazing to see women up here. The Danes had moved in, and very, very nice people, and they did all the cooking and all the work that we used to do when we pulled KP. The food was magnificent. I mean, Danish pastry. I used to spend my entire paycheck on Danish pastry when I was up there. I was getting, I think, $89 a month. I sent my mother $79. I kept 10, and I spent the other 10 on Danish pastry. But I made sure I had Danish pastry when I went back. So you had Danish pastry, a wonderful mushroom soup. Mushroom soup, I make a good one, but that was very good also. Look at this food. I'm sorry?
It can't be as good as yours.
Oh, well, I thank you. I'll take that. But chicken wings, dessert, it was just crazy. We ate like kings and had a great time. And finally, we're out and about that next day after we get squared away, and here we are with Mount Dundas in the background and ready to start touring. There was a sergeant up there, a master sergeant, a big Indian guy. I can't think of his name right now, but he had gotten in trouble. I think he knocked a lieutenant out or something. And he had gotten in trouble, and they gave him the duty of taking care of these old fogies that were coming up as punishment. And he never had such a good time in his life. Again, you can see the harbor here is just starting to break up. These pictures were taken in June, and Mount Dundas in the background. And just about this time here, the icebreaker had been in, and the cargo ships would start coming in to bringing the supplies. This was the village where the Eskimos used to live, and it was abandoned. We visited it and walked around, took pictures. It was a nice little place to go and get a feel for everything that we couldn't do when we were there in the 50s. Again, this is what the Eskimo hut looked like, but it was almost all the way to the ground when we saw it in 2002. We took a ride up to South Mountain. Now we're overlooking the base and Mount Dundas. And you're quite a ways up here, as you can see. And the scenery was incredible. As stark as it was beautiful. And again, knowing we didn't have to stay here was perfect. This is Jimmy Dalla here. Again, he was stationed up here with the Nikes and the 90 millimeters. In fact, he was here when the 90 millimeters were here, and he left before the Nikes took out the 90 millimeters. And Jimmy took us into one of the places that he hung out a lot when he was up in the mountain, and he told us it was a little different than it was before. The whole place had been flooded, and that was the results, but that was the bathroom that Jimmy Dalla actually used. And Jimmy also told us that this is where they stored their 90 millimeter rounds for the 90 millimeter cannons. I happened to catch, someone told me there's a C-17 coming in, which is a new modern day aircraft, a beautiful aircraft, huge. And someone told me there's a C-17 on its way in. So I jumped in the car and ran out to the runway, the middle of the runway, and I caught this sequence of this beautiful plane coming in. As you can see, the mountains in the background here, and he's coming in, touching down, and I was just kind of in awe as this plane got closer and closer to me, the size of it. He's taxiing in now, coming over to the airport, and you can see how big the plane is compared to this guy standing in the front. This is inside. It brought up a bunch of Army Corps of Engineers that were going to fix a bridge that was washed out because of the ice caps melting and so forth. It totally washed out the only bridge that we had in Thule. And a bunch of Army Corps engineers got off this place, took a portable bridge with them, and within a day they had a new bridge over the river, and they were back on the plane and gone. It was quite interesting. And I got inside and sat up front with the pilot. The pilot looked like he was 19 years old flying this tank. You know, it was incredible, absolutely incredible. We go out and wander around, and these were the only flowers I could find. I was dying to see if there was any life at all like this, but we found a few flowers. I put my ring beside it to see, so you could see the size of the flowers. They were very small. There were some birds up there, which naturally a lot of you have seen my bird show before. And I was out to find as many as I could, but didn't see that many. We did see one, this one here, that was quite camouflaged when it was in the rocks. And it was called the kiki bird. And this bird would go around all day. We used to hear them all the time when I was up there. And they would go, kiki, 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 right just as it's cold up here. And then we had the Arctic foxes. They were everywhere. We had them in our barracks. They were just, I don't know how these things survived, but they did. And there were rabbits up there that they used to eat. But boy, there had to be a lot of rabbits because there was a lot of this fox up there. And I think he just ate a rabbit because he's licking his chops. And now he's doing his duty. This is the Arctic fox in his winter coat. They would turn completely white during the winter. And this is the Arctic hare that the fox would be chasing. We had polar bears up there, and again, we knew that they were down at the dump where we put a lot of stuff, but it was off limits again. They didn't want anybody going down there and getting chewed up by a polar bear. There was also musk ox, and they were very big animals. I never saw one while I was there, but they were there along with wolves, and that was one of their prey that the wolves would chase down and devour. Also walruses, and the size of these things, I was amazed. They were huge, as you can see by the tusks. Those tusks are about that long. Incredible. And quite dangerous for these Eskimos to go out and spear one of these things and try and get in the boat and without getting killed. There was one other, mammal up there when I was there, and we had to be very, very careful of. And they were snow snakes. They were solid white, and they had ruby red eyes. And they would slither through the snow, and they were very hard to see. The only way you could spot them was the track that they would leave in the snow, and a lot of times the snow was hard, so you couldn't see the track of the snow snake. And you had to be extremely careful. Not that they were poisonous, but what they would do is sneak up on you, crawl up your leg, and then up your butt and freeze you to death. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Had you, didn't I? Every winter the Eskimos would come up, and they had a sled race out on the bay, and they'd come from all these tribes from all over, hundreds and hundreds of miles by dog sleds. And as soon as I spotted a dog, which I love animals, but I love dogs, I found these guys, and I thought they'd be a little on the mean side, but they were just like little puppies. Look at this guy in the right here. He's just kind of, oh, scratch my stomach, you know. And I spent almost a half a day with these guys just sitting around scratching their bellies. And a short time later, we were told that the United States government was going to take us up in a helicopter and show us around and take us places naturally that we couldn't go as 17-year-old kids. So we met our pilot, very debonair-looking guy, and also a very good pilot. We went outside. They pulled the aircraft out of the hangar on this trailer. We got in, and we were on our way for one of the greatest tours I've ever taken in my life. You can see the co-pilot here getting ready. And once we took off, we got a good view of the base that we never saw before. It was a good-sized base. I don't recall the amount of people, but it was a lot of people there, or whatever. And the higher we got, naturally, the more you could see with Mount Dundas and North Star Bay in the background. Flying closer to Mount Dundas, the pilot told us we're going up to the top of Mount Dundas, which I always wanted to do. And so I saw, this is going to be great. We're going to be on top of Mount Dundas. And he flew in low at first, flying around the base of the mountain, and then got up higher and went around the back, came around the other side, showed us the whole mountain from every side. And then finally the helicopter made a bank. He came in, made its landing, and everybody got out. And again, here's our pilot, and let us walk around the top of the mountain taking pictures. They filmed us and made a CD of it also. And then they brought out this rope, which we didn't know what they were doing with the rope. And finally, we found out that they put this rope over the last part of the mountain, which was all steep ledge and so forth, so that when you climbed the mountain on the side, when you got to this ledge, you had to, you needed something to climb with, because otherwise it was impossible unless you were a rock climber. So that rope was hanging over the side so that anybody coming up could grab that rope and pull themselves up the rest of the way and then get up onto the mountain. And that was the first time they put it out in the spring of this year. I was tickled pink to be on top of Mount Dundas again. It was just something I never ever thought I'd see. And there was a pile of rocks up there that everybody would take a rock and place it there. And so anybody that visited Mount Dundas put a rock in here, so you can see that there's been a number of people there. We were told at one point that an Eskimo was buried there, but I don't know whether that was true or not. But I finally got a chance to do that. And you can see the open area behind us here. I wandered over and I wanted to go out on the end of this rock and stand there and have my picture taken so I could say, hey, I'm out on the end of this thing. Look at this. Look at Dugie, But Doogie's afraid of heights, so I just took the picture from there. The rock and stay. I said, if I step out there, that thing is definitely going to do a Dixie, so I'm not going to go. Looking over to the north, we could see the glaciers coming down from the north, and this is North Star Bay here, and this is a radar station here, which is now taken over for the fighter interceptors and all the other planes. There are no more interceptors or bombers up there, just a runway in case they need them if there was ever an attack or whatever. But we were talking with these people in these radar sites, and they said that they can spot somebody sending off fireworks in Colorado. It's just that powerful. It was very, very interesting. They took us all through. It's a top level security place, but they took us through and gave us a great tour, and quite interesting. We started heading over now towards the glacier and the other side. And you see this mountain on the left-hand side and the glacier coming down through. This is a little washed out, but it's okay. And that's the frozen bay right there, and the icebergs locked into the frozen bay. So as we get closer, heading over to the edge of the ice cap, the icebergs get bigger, and these things were enormous. I mean, you look down out of the helicopter at them, and they'd probably be the size of North Beverly, maybe, something like that, maybe bigger. And again, just a place you would not want to crash. But we were tickled pink. Everybody was taking pictures, and we finally got over to the ice cap where she's breaking off into the sea. And the pilot put the plane down, and he went between the ice cap and the mountain. There was like a gap, and he dropped down into this gap, and all of a sudden, all conversation between us ceased, because we were kind of getting ready for some Palomino pants, maybe, because we were, those blades were wicked close to one side of the mountain and the other side to the ice cap. And we didn't say a word when he went all through this thing, and finally he bailed out and come up, and we just all breathed a sigh of relief that we were still alive. But then he started taking us in closer to the ice cap, as you can see here. And there's this mammoth. These were huge. I mean, we could land the helicopter on that right there. So you can see the size of this thing, you know. It was immense. And we just flew around examining them. And this is this little valley here that we flew through, up and around here and came out the top. Again, it was a little early in the season for these things to be breaking off and falling into the sea, which I really wanted to see. But it was too early in the season. If we had gotten up there in July, we could have seen something like that. But just a dynamic sight, big caves that you could stick downtown Beverly in, you know. And finally, we're back at the base. Everybody had a great ride, and I still had a hankering to get back to Mount Dundas and climb it. So we all went back the next day, and we started to climb. And I'm happy to say that I was the only one that made it. The other guys were too old. But I climbed the mountain with the sergeant that was showing us around. And here we are heading up. And it's a very tough climb because what you're doing is you're climbing on shale rock. So you take one step and slide back two. And it just went like that all the way up, and your legs are trying to, it's like being in a boat in a rough sea, you know, you're trying to get your balance and stuff. And you can see we're getting higher. That's our vehicle in the background. And here's the sergeant coming up with me. And then finally we get to the rope, and we were able to pull ourselves up, and voila, I'm back on the mountain again, and I had climbed it. The sergeant said it was the first time he had ever done it too, and he was tickled pink. And we became pretty good buddies. We had to head back down using the rope also. And coming down again, you're walking on the shale and sliding. And when I got to the bottom of the mountain, my legs were so out of whack, I actually couldn't walk. It was just, it took me about 10 minutes to get my balance to where I could walk normally. I found this tractor that I would have loved to have had a ride in, but they don't use it during the summer. But a beautiful machine, something we could have used a few months ago around here. And then while I was out, I came across something that kind of puzzled me. You know, I said, the United States Air Force Base. I said, what in the hell is an anchor this size doing here at the Air Force Base? That thing would fit on an aircraft carrier. And then as I looked around, I found three more. So there were 4 of them placed throughout the base. And they weren't there when I was there. And I asked somebody, I said, what is with these anchors? I said, we're Air Force, not Navy. And he says, that's your taxes at work. He said, the commander of the base put in a petition for 4 wall anchors. And somehow, along the way, there was a mix-up. So that's what your taxes are paying for right there. Let me back up one here. Now we decided that we were going to take a ride out to the ice cap itself, and from this point on, 800 miles behind us is the North Pole. And we figured we'd leave our mark, and these 5 grown men or 6 grown men started building an igloo. Like little kids. Look at them, they just can't wait to get out. I get some here. So we built this igloo and set it up in such a way that if you got far enough away and the guy took the pictures here, it looked pretty big. So we built this big igloo, And I had a great time doing it, but it was just kind of cool being that far back and knowing if we just started walking another 800 miles, we'd be at the North Pole. I was also amazed that the United States Air Force had a ship. And this was used for, pushing the boats into the dock when they come in with the supplies in the summer. Again, there's the ship and the harbor and Mount Dundas in the background. We had many parties that they threw for us, and we did a lot of great things, and I had the best steak I ever had in my life at Thule, Greenland. It was the best I've ever had. And this particular night, we had a chore that we had to do. We had to sing a song that we used to sing when all of us were back at Thule in the 50s. And this was the song here, and it went, I was happy, I was free, what's become of me? They put me on an aeroplane and sent me to Thule. On the shores of North Shore Bay, where the walrus play, where the winds blow 90 plus, phasing all the day. I'm in Thule, so are you. Tell me why. How I hate this lovely place. Send me home to die. And at one of these things that we did, this is the commander. He was the Danish commander of Thule. He was in charge of everybody, including the United States Air Force. This was the commander of the Air Force up there behind me, and holding the flag of the United States Air Force, which I was in. And one more time, we got our second certificate for crossing the Arctic Circle, Knights of the Blue Nose. These were some Eskimo friends of mine that we had met at the Airmen's Club up there, Top of the World Club it's called, and they were very nice. It was kind of amazing. We saw them sitting kind of off to the side in the room, and I went over and I started talking with them and got friendly with them. And there was about 3 or 4 or 5 of them, I guess. And I said, come on over and join us, and we can talk and we'll buy you a drink. And they said, we're not allowed. And I said, what do you mean you're not allowed? And they said, we're not allowed to sit over there with those people. I said, you are now. And I said, let's go. And I took them over to the table and we sat. And I was actually waiting for somebody to come up and say, you're not supposed to be here. And I was ready to go back to 17 again and kick some ass because I was not going to listen to that. They were very, very sweet people. And they came down to the last meeting that we had. And we all got up and gave a speech. And this was the last part of the speech that I gave. You people of Thule have been ever so gracious. You've gone above and beyond to make this trip a memorable one for all of us. There are no words to express our gratitude, so we will say, Colonel Rapino, we salute you. Lieutenant Gardner, we salute you. We salute you and the men and women of Thule Air Force Base. We salute you also. And speaking for myself, thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me the opportunity to be 18 again. I cried then, I'm crying now. So we all went out and we celebrated till all hours of the morning. When we came outside the club, this was 2:30 in the morning, and it's still daylight. We went back to our rooms and had a few more beers. And like always, when I go to a party, if I'm not the first to get there and the last one to leave, I'm not happy. So we put the guy on the left to bed, and Jimmy Darlow was the only guy that managed to stay with me until all hours of the morning. And then with a little bit of a glow on, we went back to our 17 again, and we stacked beer cans against the doors of the other guys that went to bed. The next day, there was a fog in the air. It was an ice fog. It wasn't like a fog that you'd have around here today. It was like ice crystals, very kind of spooky, but very unique and very interesting. These are the guys getting the plane ready for us to go. I took advantage of a pillow and a blanket on the way back. And again, looking out the window, we're leaving Greenland here, and finally wound up at McGuire Air Force Base. We served our country during the Cold War and never were in combat. But if the time came, we were ready, just like the young men and women of today are ready. The spirit of American veterans. The end. Hope you had fun. Thank you very much. Great audience. Any questions?
Dugie,
Yeah.
so it's just a radar base now, it's just a skeleton crew?
Yeah, there's no bombers, fighters, or anything like that because we don't need it. Everything is missiles today, so.
Now, there was an oil farm there?
There was an oil farm for when I was there, yeah.
That's all taken down, or?
Yeah, they were stripping them when we were there, yeah.
But they were stripping when you were there?
Yeah, I had pictures, but I had to break this thing down like crazy because I had hundreds of more pictures that I could have put in there.
So if you went back, 255 wouldn't be there anymore, your barracks?
No, the barracks was there. The only thing they were taking down was the fuel tanks because they didn't need them for the aircraft, Other than that, everything was the same.
No, but I'm saying now.
Now,
13 years later.
13 years.
You were there in 2000.
Yeah.
13 years later, your barracks is no longer there.
No. The barracks is still there. There's still Danes working there. They live in the Danes have taken over the place more or less. They do all the work up there and so forth.
What's the status of Greenland as far as ownership? Nobody owns it?
Danes. The Danish own it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long was your visit?
The visit was 10 days, and it was the best I ever spent in my life.
See any evidence of so-called global warming after 40 years?
Yes, there was, and that's why I say one of the bridges, the only bridge up there, was washed out because of the ice cap melting. It opened the ravine and just took out, the bridge was this long, and then the span of the river was this long, because of the wash coming off of the ice cap. And I noticed that the ice cap had faded from the time I was there in the 50s till today. You could definitely see the difference.
How'd you manage to get into the Air Force at 17?
My mother signed. And plus I had to get out of Beverly real quick. Mr. Pat and I didn't have a good relationship.
There were 3 languages on the barracks wall.
I'm sorry?
3 languages on the wall of the barracks for smokers. One was English, I guess one was Dutch. What was the third language?
3 languages, no smoking bar. There was 2 other languages. Was it the Inuit? There were 3 languages on one of the walls.
Oh, I don't know. I know it would be Danish, English, and possibly Inuit. I don't know. I didn't notice that.
Any other countries using that base?
Any other countries using it? Canada was represented there also, but not much. They didn't have any fighters or anything up there when I was there. Anybody else?
Right here.
Yes, sir.
How long does the harbor stay open?
The harbor will stay open all summer, and then it'll start closing up in probably August, September, something like that. And then it just freezes over solid, and that's it. Then it's dark, We used to send, when I got up there, it happened to everybody, but we were up there and a young man came in, another young airman came in, and he had been here about, I don't know, a week, not even a week. His first day there, second day. And we woke him up at 7 o'clock at night and told him, you better get your butt over to the hangar, man. They're waiting for you. You were supposed to be there at 7, you know. So Jesus, he got dressed and he threw his uniform on and he took off and he drove over. Now this is pitch black dark. And he got there and the sergeant there asked him what he was doing there. And he said, I'm sorry, I'm late for work. And he says, you're not late for work. He says, it's 7 o'clock at night. He was supposed to be there at 7 in the morning. We just told him it was 7 o'clock in the morning, and he thought it was, you know. You're looking at me very confused here. Did I confuse you with this? What grade did you go to in school?
Hello? They're going to pay for this.
Did everybody get that, by the way? Yes, thank you. Well, except this guy. Well,
What were your temperatures? You spoke of 60 below at one point. How about your summer temperatures?
summers up there weren't bad. As you can see, we were walking around some of the days with just a nice warm shirt on, you know. And I've seen it get up, what was the highest? 60 maybe, something like that in the summer, you know.
What was your length of summer? June?
I remember we were in the chow hall one day eating, and it was, you know, winter, coming in spring, which was about June, maybe May, and all of a sudden this beam of light came in the window and crossed down on the floor, went over the floor, and come up on the other wall, and we all started screaming, "Yay, the sun's coming!" And then it went, and right back out the window again. And then it just got longer and longer until we get sick of the sun, you know? We used to put a piece of cardboard in our window and in the winter, and it had a picture of sun and palm trees. And then in the summer, we had stars and a moon on a piece of black tar paper. Yes, sir?
Did you ever see the Northern Lights?
Did, many times, yeah. It's quite a scene. I never got any pictures, though. I don't know why. Probably down the Airmen's Club, and the lights come out, and I didn't see them.
We had mostly black and white film, so.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Anything else?
How long was your active duty up there?
1 year.
Just one?
Yeah, and believe me, it was enough. It was enough. But I never thought I'd want to go back, but I'd go back in a heartbeat tomorrow if I had another opportunity just to do a little more.
That's the difference.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I'm
Yes.
sorry. What do you think of the glacier meltdown?
I think it's definitely going on, and it's going to get very serious for us down the line. Very serious if it keeps going.
Right.
And by the looks of things, that's the way it's going to go.
You feel bad for the polar bears?
I do, because the polar bears have actually moved away from Thule now. There aren't any polar bears in that area. They've moved further north. And then pretty soon it's just going to be too much for them, you know. They're going to have to readapt somehow. Anybody else? Thank you all for coming. It was a pleasure.